Well, with more now on the latest Trump tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, we're joined by Bruske, President of the Canadian Labour Congress. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, I want to start with impact here because we have heard that this 50% tariff on Canadian steel alone will be devastating to that industry. But steel, aluminum, the surrounding industries, what will the impact of this be in terms of job losses in this country?
Well, the reality is steel and aluminum alone, job losses are expected to be very significant. The U.S. is our largest trading partner for steel and aluminum, our largest export market, and so cutting off that opportunity to provide them with those materials means that job losses will be a reality. And so in the steel sector, we're talking 23,000 jobs that are directly connected to steel. And aluminum, it's 9,500. The spin-off jobs in addition to that get us to 160,000 jobs minimum. But then, of course, there's the other jobs that will be impacted in significant industries. So we've heard it from the automotive industry, we've heard it from the defense industry, from aerospace, manufacturing, from construction, because a lot of the materials go back and forth across our borders multiple times before they get to the end consumer. And so you're adding on additional cost every single time that happens. And that means that we will have losses there also.
So tens of thousands of jobs, 160,000 at the very least, according to your numbers. How soon of an impact is this going to be? Because, I think part of the calculus of this is that we knew pain would be coming down the pipes. How big of a pain, we weren't entirely certain. Now we're talking about tens of thousands of jobs, but how soon will people experience those losses?
So we know we've already experienced job losses. I was in Hawkesbury, Ontario earlier in the spring. There were already job losses because of the uncertainty. Now with the reality of these doubled tariffs, we are expecting in the coming days and weeks that those job losses will become real.
Okay, coming days and weeks, you are calling for emergency reforms to employment insurance. Talk to us about what exactly you're calling for, how that might help in this situation.
Workers need to know that there is a strong social safety net that's going to be there for them, especially at this very fraught time. And so we've been advocating for a very long time for improvements to employment insurance. Right now, only 2 out of 5 applicants for EI actually qualify for EI. That's a huge problem. The last time EI was really overhauled was in 1996. And I don't know about you, but the world of work has changed a lot since 1996. We need to look at eligibility rules. We need to look at length of opportunity in terms of for people to be on employment insurance. But we're not just looking for EI changes. We're looking for opportunities to have workers be furloughed so that they can stay connected to that workplace. We're looking for wage subsidies so that workers can maybe look at job sharing if that could be an option, right? We need to keep workers attached to their workplaces ideally and attached to their communities. Some of the smaller communities that are steel and aluminum specific communities, once you lose workers out of those communities, you're not easily getting them back. And these workers are often very specialized and skilled workers. So it's not like you can just fire the plant back up again and you can have all of those workers back in that workplace.
Mm-hmm. So increasing the number of people who qualify for EI, also rethinking how EI is applied so that furloughed rather than completely laid off keeps companies going. Any indication whatsoever, because this is not the first time I've heard this proposal from the CLC, any indication from this government in particular that they are hearing what you're calling for and will respond?
Well, listen, we just came through it felt like a lengthy, but I know it was a short federal election, and we heard from our friends at the NDP and from the Liberals that all of the tariff countermeasures that have been implemented, all of the money gained from those would go to worker supports and would go to business supports to make sure that those places can continue to function, that workers can continue to have jobs. Now is when the rubber hits the road. Now is when we need government to actually announce what they are prepared to do. And so we have not yet seen government say these are the things we will do to ensure workers are taken care of. That is what we need to be demanding right now, because workers can't wait. They are worried right now about paying the rent. They are worried right now about, can I sign my kid up for soccer this summer? They are worried about their standard of living and being able to actually navigate and stay in the communities that they're in right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, beyond those support for workers, I'm wondering what else you want the government to do, because there are some levers that a government has at its disposal. For example, I think it's the Canadian steel industry. The industry head was talking about, for example, hitting other countries that dump steel in Canada with Canadian tariffs so that Canadian companies could be prioritized. What else are you calling for the government to do?
First and foremost, I completely agree with that assessment. We need to make sure that we don't become the dumping ground for cheap steel and aluminum from other parts of the world. So firstly, we need to make sure that any public infrastructure projects utilizes Canadian content, right? We're also looking for, is there a tax break that could be given for private sector projects to utilize all Canadian content to keep people at work and keep people employed first and foremost. We need to make sure that we don't have U.S. steel and aluminum crossing our border, because we do actually import from the U.S. So, you know, it has to go both ways. We need to be able to make sure that we are just as forceful in our response as what we are facing.
Quickly running out of time, but if you were to give a 1 to 5 word description of where we are in this moment for workers in this country, what would you say? We are at a crisis moment. This will not just impact steel and aluminum workers or their communities. This will impact all Canadian workers at one point or another. Our government needs to step up and needs to make announcements in terms of how we're going to be protecting workers now. Bruske, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.